Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to Crunch Time. It is sponsored by Fanduel, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, what kind of sick puppies have an entire show for free for a one-game NBA slate? We are those sick puppies. I'm Kevin Roth. I'm here to host the show. I'm not giving any advice, but I'm hanging out with one of the sharpest minds in the biz. It is Keith Eister, aka the Iceman. Ice, what the hell are we doing, man? How you feeling?
Well, we have an interesting one-game NBA schedule tonight,
Yeah.
so very cool from a content perspective. Not much going on, but that leaves us a little short on action tonight too. Luckily, we have a football game to occupy our time as well. But yeah, and it's not the most exciting game in the world, right? We have Dallas, who's a good team, but then they're playing Detroit, which pretty widespread here. That does add some interesting elements to Showdown, I suppose. Do you play for the blowout? Do you not? I don't know, but yeah, a very light schedule tonight. We'll break it down best we can. Probably a good night to exercise some bankroll management. There's still some decent prize pools out there, but bankroll management is key on these types of days.
Yeah, you don't want to lose it all on a one-game NBA slate. It seems
Right.
like that would be a poor choice. By the way, I did mention the show is sponsored by FanDuel. Make sure you're getting in the FanDuel single entry series for NFL. You got entry points at $5, $33, and $100. Weekly and seasonal prizes going on there. And then, of course, the FanDuel Sportsbook, if you're in a legal sports betting state. They've got a fantastic bonus offer. New customers get their no sweat first bet up to 1K. So make sure you're doing that. And Ice, is there a difference? Usually, like we go over FanDuel and we talk about what's unique there, and then we go over DraftKings, and it can sometimes be a completely different animal. But with one game, like I imagine it's not too vastly different, right?
It's not too vastly different as far as the players, but the style of games are different on each site. So FanDuel utilizes the MVP that gets you 2x, Star that gets you 1.5x, and Pro that gets you 1.2x.
Oh,
Whereas DraftKings, and all the salaries are the same no matter which position you play them at. DraftKings is captain only, and then 5 flex positions. Captain, you have to pay 1.5 the salary on. So it is a little bit of a different game. So
okay.
that does influence your decisions a little bit.
Okay, so on FanDuel, there's absolutely no reason whatsoever to not play Luca. Where on DK, you could at least make an argument against it, though I'm guessing you won't make that argument.
I will not be making that argument. Luca projects by the best play on the slate by like 25 raw points. His floor is higher than anyone else's ceiling on the entire game.
Stop it. That's insane. That's pretty wild.
It is wild, but that's what we are dealing with here on FanDuel, where you do not have to pay a premium for Luca. Very easy decision just to lock him in the MVP, in my opinion. On DraftKings, I suppose you could make the case, like you said, though, like it takes some extreme game theory, even with the 1.5 multiplier on the salary, to find a game script where Luca does not just smash every other player in the game.
Okay. Well, let's kind of walk through things. We've got the FanDuel up here. Let's talk through it. You mentioned right off the bat, we're plugging in Luca, 2x his points. But that's going to be like literally 100% owned because that's just what you do. So that doesn't really help.
Yes. Even though you're going to run into a lot more duplication plugging Luca into the MVP, I think that's the way you have to go. I just don't see a scenario, I mean, barring an injury or something crazy, where one of these guys can come close enough to Luca. You don't have to pay a premium on the salary. You just lock Luca in the MVP. In my opinion, he's going to be the highest fantasy scorer in the game. Even if he has a terrible game, it's likely that he still has the most raw points in the entire game. So MVP is pretty easy. Lock Luca. I think where you need to make some tough decisions is at the next position at Star and even at Pro, where you do get the multiplier on the fantasy points. You can see some guys jump up and overtake like some of the players who are projected ahead of them. So that's where I would try to get different. And then in the utility spots where you just get the flat fantasy points, I think you can mess around with some players who you would never play on a normal NBA slate. But this game environment, we have a widespread here. 8 points. Detroit is underdogs of 8 points. I think you could see a scenario where Dallas wins big and there's some, 5 or 6 minutes of garbage time run at the end, and you see a player pop up and put up 15 points, and that might be good enough if somebody who is expected to play 30 minutes only gets their 25 minutes or whatever. Maybe one of those scrub guys could match that. So I think that's what you do in the utility spot. But just going through the star position a little bit here, you're looking still for some ceiling. So just off the bat, coming into today, there hasn't been any news really. We knew Cade Cunningham was going to be out. Christian Wood got the questionable tag. Jaden Ivey was questionable as well. Both of them are in. So we only have one game and there's no news whatsoever. So just not a lot to deal with as far as weird things on this slate. It's pretty straightforward. Ivey has missed 3 games. He is priced up at $14K here on FanDuel. I think you could take an underweight stance on Jaden Ivey just with some uncertainty coming back from a knee injury. And then Christian Wood, the other one coming into the game questionable. His was only an illness, so he's probably fine. I wouldn't have any concerns there. But he is a guy who can lose minutes. He usually only plays 25, 26 minutes, and you need him to absolutely smash in those minutes. He's priced up at 12.5. So I think both of those guys are in the conversation here at Star, but they're going to get ownership. And I think going a different way for large field tournaments is probably the way I would begin to differentiate my lineup.
But like you need in those spots, because price doesn't matter and fantasy points are multiplied, you need one of the top 4 or 5 scoring guys. Like you, so you're not getting that crazy.
Correct. You're not. Yeah. I mean, Ivey and Wood are absolutely in the conversation. I would throw Bogdanovich and Dinwiddie in there as well, and possibly even Hardaway. We're talking about players whose median projections are differing by like 2 or 3 points here. Where when we're talking about the MVP decision with Luka, it's a 25-point gap. Like that's very difficult and unlikely that it's going to be overcome. In the star position, you can get a little weird for sure. The top 4 would be Ivey, Wood, Dinwiddie, and Bogdanovich. Killian Hayes has been playing really well without Cade Cunningham, but Ivey has been out the last couple of games as well, so he is now priced up. He's a little bit overpriced for his role, in my opinion. With Ivey back, makes for an interesting tournament play. He could continue to play really well, even alongside of Ivey. But just note that if you're looking at Hayes' game log, you have to consider that Ivey has missed the last couple of games as well. Hardaway, just because he can score a bunch, I think is in that conversation. I love his price. He is a guy I would definitely be overweight on at 9K. Should out there for 30 minutes. I think he gets close to that, even if the Mavs are pulling away in this one. And then the other guy, probably a little overpriced, but a guy who does have some ceiling is Marvin Bagley at 12K. Just a guy who can put up a bunch of fantasy points per minute. He doesn't play a ton of minutes, but he should be in that 25, 26 range as well. And I guess Isaiah Stewart's worth mentioning as well. Came back, played 26 minutes in his first game back from injury. They have been playing, or last game anyway, they started Bagley and Stewart together. So that is one thing I'm keeping an eye on is the Pistons starting lineup. But Bagley and Stewart started together and played a bunch on the court at the same time. So we will have to see what that lineup looks like. I think those 2 guys have some upside, though. You could consider them for MVP and star positions as well. That's pretty much the pool I would consider. Like Sadiq Bey is coming off the bench again. It's going to be difficult for him to play the minutes to get there. If he jumps back into the starting lineup, it becomes a different conversation around Sadiq Bey.
Okay, real quick, I locked out my family from my home and they're pounding on the door, so I need to take care of that.
Okay,
so
no worries.
I'll be back. I'm sorry. I just, when you lock it, you don't think about it. I'll be right back.
Yep, all good. All right, so I think that pretty much covers the position or the players that I would consider at the MVP and our positions. So moving into some of the more off the board plays, Dorian Finney-Smith is a guy who's going to be out there for a bunch of minutes. We don't know that he will score a bunch of fantasy points, but he at least will be out there on the floor. I will note also Maxi Kleber, with the Pistons playing 2 bigs, could get a little more run in this game. He hasn't been seeing a ton of run recently. They've been kind of leaning towards Josh Green a little bit more. But Klebo with the Pistons playing two bigs could be interesting. He might get some run. My favorite way to differentiate in the utility positions is with the Pistons bottom of the roster. We've seen guys like Kevin Knox play big minutes. Hamidou Diallo at times has played minutes. Isaiah Livers is a guy who has some talent. Right now we have Livers projected to play the most minutes out of that trio. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Knox or Diallo took over some of those minutes. So the Pistons guys at the bottom, I think, are a great way to differentiate. And they would be safe in a blowout as well. Like you could see Knox play 25 minutes if this game were to get out of hand. We've seen that here in the recent past. Obviously, they've been without Ivy, and that helped him get on the floor a little bit. But Knox, I think, is a very interesting guy to use in the utility spot.
Okay, real quick. I'm seeing this in chat, and I haven't seen it confirmed. But Casey Douglas says Ivy's not starting. Were we projecting him to start and have seen something that says contrary?
I am seeing that is confirmed. The official lineup is Hayes, Livers, Bogdanovich, Stewart, Bagley. Oh man, that makes this extremely interesting.
Well, you already said you could go underweight on Ivy, right?
Yeah, I think you could completely fade him now. Honestly, he's priced up. You're not getting a discount at all. I don't see him playing the 30. I'm sure the projections team is updating it right now. With him out of the starting lineup, he's not going to play 32 minutes more than likely. I would be completely off of Jaden Ivey. That does make the guys I was just talking about, Livers especially being in the starting lineup now, very interesting. I have more interest in Sadiq Bey now as well. Like his minutes could be anywhere from 20 to 35. It's an extremely wide range of outcomes on Sadiq Bey's minutes. And then guys like Knox and Diallo, even Corey Joseph, if Ivy just is active to be active and doesn't play, like I feel like they're easing him back in. He's going to play like 20, 25-ish minutes. But I don't think you can play him at that price, and it makes the bottom of the Pistons roster even more interesting. Okay,
so now we got a few things going for bottom of the order for the Pistons with the potential blowout, or maybe some of these guys could get more run. Okay, interesting stuff. Let's talk DK here, unless you've got anything to add on FanDuel.
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
Okay, well then let's kick over to DK, where you're actually paying more for guys who score more in their scoring system.
Yes, even with that dynamic, I still think that Luka is a lock button captain. Like you're paying almost half of your salary cap for Luka in the top spot, but it's just what makes sense from a fantasy points perspective. Like,
what does it cost you? Like, if you do that, are there dudes that you want that you can't get anymore, or no, because nobody else is all that pricey?
There's really not even. And if you look at it from just a math perspective, he's literally projected for double the fantasy points. You only have to pay 1.5 times his salary to get him in the top spot. The math play is just play Luka in the top spot. The only reason you're not doing it is game theory reasons. You hope that he has an off shooting night, but the Mavericks somehow still blow out the Pistons and he only gets 3/4 of run. Like any lineup I wasn't playing Luka the captain, I would definitely go Dinwiddie or Christian Wood, I think. I don't see any way that somebody from the Pistons, like the Pistons aren't going to win this game. Like it's possible, I suppose, but like there's no ceiling guys really. Bogdanovich doesn't have a huge ceiling. You would need somebody like Bagley just to go absolutely nuts. Maybe Sadiq Bey off the bench nails a bunch of threes to keep them in the game. But even in that scenario, that just means Luka's playing 35 plus minutes, and it's going to be very difficult for him to fail.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Well, then let's talk about some of these other plays. And, because here we've just kind of filling in the other slots. Any position, right?
Yep. Same position, one flex position. You get to choose 5 of them. Yeah. There isn't anything really different from what I mentioned. Ivy is priced up here. I would be certainly underweight, if not a complete fade, Jaden Ivey. Christian Wood is priced up as well. I think I'd be underweight there to go overweight on guys like Bogdanovich, Tim Hardaway. Bagley and Stewart are both interesting to me if they can find a ceiling. You need a bunch of rebounds probably from Stewart to get there and for him to stay out of foul trouble. But this isn't a particularly difficult matchup for him as far as like Mavs bigs are concerned. Wood's a bit of a problem for him, but I don't know how they would match up. they may not be on the floor all that much the way that the Mavs utilize Wood. So Killian Hayes, another guy that I said underweight on FanDuel, probably underweight on DraftKings here. He's just too expensive for the role. Although he's more interesting now with Ivy coming off the bench. So I guess I have to walk that back a little bit with the Pistons starting lineup. Hayes is still overpriced, but he's going to have a better role than was expected when I said that over on FanDuel. 7,600 is still pricey. He's going to be out there for the minutes. It's just, what is the usage going to be with Ivy back in there? How much do they see the floor together? Interesting. I probably still don't end up overweight on Hayes, but I am more interested than I was before we saw the starting lineup.
Okay. There's some cheapies over there, and I wouldn't mind talking about kind of a lineup construction as far as I had someone in the chat say, I'm thinking about going 5-1, like 5 Dallas guys, one or the other, or maybe it was the other way around. But any thoughts to construction?
5-1 Dallas, I think, makes sense for the blowout, but what you run into there is the cheap Pistons are then going to get additional run, who are some of my favorite value plays. I would not use one cheap Piston as my only run back, I don't think. I think I would try to, like, if you have Luka in the top spot and you're saying he went off and he is the reason that Detroit is so far behind, then I probably fade a lot of the mid-range Mavs, like the Dinwiddies and the Woods, maybe even Hardaway, and play guys like Finney Smith and Kleba. Josh Green, I think, is interesting. But to do one Pistons guy, I think you need it to be like a Bogdanovich, a Hayes, now that Ivy's out of the starting lineup, Bagley or Stewart. I don't think you can go just as one cheap value Piston as your only one. Okay.
Can you do a build here? Do we have it so you can plug in some of these guys and we can kind of see how much cash we have left to play with?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So we're locking Luka in the top spot. We've kind of already talked about that.
Yep.
Then I think I would prioritize, just from a price per dollar standpoint, Tim Hardaway has, I think, my favorite point per dollar price. So he's my second favorite Maverick. I talked about, with Ivy out of the starting lineup, I don't think you play him. Bogdanovich is a safe play, but not a ton of ceiling. He's in play if we have the money, but I wouldn't prioritize him. Kind of the same thing with Killian Hayes. So that leads me to one of the bigs, either Bagley or Stewart. That's a tough call. Like, if you think Stewart can play a few more minutes, he might have the higher upside. I feel like 26 to 28 is kind of his cap, though. So I'm going to lean Bagley on that. It's a $400 difference. They're kind of interchangeable to me. I would not play them both on the same lineup. So give me Bagley there. And that leaves us, what, 5,000 to work with, I think, if I'm seeing that correctly. So then, like, I've talked about these cheap Pistons, and I think even more now with Ivy out, I think the rotation could be really weird here. Livers at 3,400. If it was like a single entry three max with him starting, he should be out there for 20 plus minutes, 25 minutes more than likely. At 3,400, if you plug him in there, you can pretty much do whatever you want with the rest of your lineup. So that's a great, like, single entry build type of thing. And if you're looking for a large field tournament and trying to go off the board a little bit, maybe throw a second cheap Piston in there, playing for the blowout, and then leave some salary on the table.
Okay, very good. And interested in Josh Green. I think he's been getting like mid-20s minutes lately, been shooting some threes.
Yeah, I mentioned him just in passing. I am interested in that. He's really cheap, especially on DraftKings. He's near the minimum on FanDuel too, I believe. He's not putting up a ton of fantasy points, but the run has been looking better. He's been playing well. He seems like a guy who could be earning more minutes here. So I do like being overweight on Josh Green.
Okay, very good. Anything else you want to add here? We've got 10 minutes until lock, and we'll see if there's a couple questions we can take.
I think that pretty much covers it. We'll see what questions people have.
Okay, there might not be any. I don't know. We're talking about how much money mascots make in the chat, so I don't think it's. There's like season-long fantasy questions coming in, but we'll try to keep. Oh, here's a good one. How much money are you leaving on the table in a GPP? Okay, go for it.
So basketball is usually a sport where you don't use a lot of money, but this is a slate where it is extremely difficult to differentiate. If I'm doing that, I think I'm playing blowout script. So it is perfectly viable to play Luka in the captain, fade a bunch of the other Mavs, maybe one or two range Pistons, and then play like a Josh Green, Isaiah Livers, Kevin Knox type of thing, and that leaves a significant amount of salary. So I am totally comfortable leaving salary on this, just because there are multiple ways the game could go. And I think you get a situation where these 3K and under price guys could play more minutes than the 5 and 6K range guys.
Okay, good stuff. Rich says, hey, Powell's starting. He's super cheap. Can you plug him in? He usually only plays like 12, 15 minutes, but also sometimes those Mavs rotations are crazy. You never really know what they're going to do.
Yeah, I don't think Powell has a chance to play over 20. They're going to use Christian Wood a ton. Maxi Kleba is there. Just there's no ceiling with Powell, in my opinion. I know he's cheap, but I would much rather, like, even in a blowout, I don't think he has a chance at like 25 minutes. So I'd play Josh Green ahead of him every time, and I would play the Pistons guys ahead of him for the blowout opportunities.
Okay. All right, very good. Checking the RG Discord, which, by the way, if you're not a member of the RG Discord, sign up. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, for this ridiculous free show for one game, all we ask is that little thumbs up button. You got to click that for us. Do us a favor. Derek says, hey, DKGPP, Wood with a questionable tag or Hayes, you're not concerned with the Q tag because they said he's playing.
Yeah, I mean, it's an illness. He wouldn't be out there if he was having to take trips to the bathroom or whatever it is. Right. I'm not concerned. Hayes is more interesting now that Ivy is not starting. I'd still go Wood, but like before, it was very clearly Wood. With Ivy not starting, it is a conversation. I'd still lean Wood, though.
Okay, but you're not concerned he's going to Paul Pierce himself.
No, I don't.
Carried off the court with the poopy pants. Scott Walker says, all right, he says, DK, are we running a 4-2 Dallas build or a 3-3 balance build? I think could you do either? Do you have a strong preference?
Yeah, you could certainly do either. I think the 4-2 build is going to be the most common construction because you want the majority Dallas players with them having them being sizable favorites. But the value is on the Pistons side, so that is how you get the two Pistons. I think adding that third cheap Piston in there and leaving a little bit of salary is a great way to differentiate in large field. So if you're single entry, it's probably a 4-2. If large field and you need more differentiation, I like the three.
Okay, very good. Question from Rich here. He says, I had $200 left. Should I go Kojo over Powell then?
Yeah, I would be fine with that. I don't like the Detroit rotation is so hard to figure out. You know what you're getting from Powell, so this is kind of a decision for the user. If you want the safe play, Powell is going to play 15 to 20 minutes, but he's likely only going to get you
safe play. That's the safe play is Powell.
I mean,
that's terrifying.
Kojo could literally not see the court.
Okay.
So like he's projected for 4 minutes right now, but he could also play 25 minutes. It's very volatile. I don't love either of them, honestly. Which on DraftKings, let me look at the pricing here. Powell is 2,200, so he doesn't have enough to get Bullock, doesn't have enough to get Knox. Yeah, there's nothing safe down there. It's tough. Powell is the safe guy.
Okay, well, that's crazy. All right, guess what? We did a hell of a job. We almost took it to lock on a one-game slate. That's pretty wild. Excellent content, man. I feel like I should have been building as you were talking because I really think you have a good grasp of what was going on. Anything else you want to add? Because I think we can bounce. We got all the questions.
I don't have anything else. It matters if the game stays close and you need some of the other secondary Mavs, or if Luka just goes nuts and blows them out and some of these cheap Pistons really come through.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good stuff. As I mentioned, I got to go be nice to the family since I locked them out of the house for like 2 minutes there. So guys, we appreciate you watching. As I mentioned, go ahead, hit that thumbs up for us, for Ice and for our wonderful production team, always working hard behind the scenes. Guys, we appreciate you. We love you. We will catch you tomorrow. You have been crunched.